And thanks for staying with us. This is the third part of our discussion series on Nigeria at 59, and today we shall be focusing on the rule of the elite. Our correspondent, Aisha Ubali, was out on the streets to seek the opinions of Nigerians on the rule of the elite in Nigeria at 59.
Well, our elite contribute in moving the nation forward on one hand, and at the other hand, they also contribute in moving the nation backward. Yeah, for moving the nation forward, they have tried their best in making sure that the stability of the nation, from the independence to now, for the nation to remain stable, is a very good and strong decision taken by the elite. Because if they could have not taken that kind of decision, the nation could have not stayed up to this time around. But in the other, where they have not done well, is in the area of not contributing positively for the growth and development of the nation. Particularly when you compare the growth of Nigeria today and also that of our mates. You understand, those that got independent 59 years back together with us, and now you can surely see that they are far ahead of us.
A lot have gone the way it's not supposed to go. We always thought we are the leaders of tomorrow, but the tomorrow never come for us to achieve. And I believe the elite has contributed very little to the development of Nigeria. If they have done like we are supposed to, Nigeria should be a better place than the way we are today.
But to those who really believe in the country, they've done well. Yeah, but to some who probably may not believe, maybe will have their own views too. But collectively, I believe the elites are doing well.
Honestly, I must say the truth. I'm not sure they have done any good in moving this country forward at all. Because when you look at it, most of them have visited outside the country and they see what is happening there. And compared to what we are having at 59, they have not contributed anything tangible that we will say they have done well. So they still need to do more and copy what they are seeing outside the world and do the same for us in Nigeria. Nigeria would have been a better place if they are imitating and doing what they have seen outside the country for us here in Nigeria.
Maybe the person does not actually implement your good counsel, you understand? And if you're not in the seat of power, you know, there's much, maybe minimal, that you could be able to offer in terms of basic advice that will be considered. At one point or the other, we have had conferences here where people were selected from different geopolitical zones, and so much was the outcome, but we are yet to see the implementation of such meaningful efforts, you know.
At least most in any political dispensation, at least whether they like it or not, they must play their role for the betterment of the country.
I would like to thank our correspondent for the Vox Pop. You heard what Nigerians were saying, Kieran. You listened to the lady and what she said. These are fairly common sentiments.
The real people.
The real people expressing their sentiments. But we have guests with us in the studio right here, and as well as at our Jos and Lagos Network Centers to discuss this issue in further detail. It's a pleasure to welcome distinguished Senator Ken Nnamani, former President of the Senate of the Federal Republic. Distinguished Senator, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
I'm glad to be here.
And for purposes of history, because this morning we had a news story, we have also been reading in the newspapers that President Muhammadu Buhari is not interested in the third term. Distinguished Senator Ken Nnamani was President of the Senate when the idea of a third term was shut down. Distinguished Senator, pleasure to have you again.
Again, I'm very delighted to be here.
And it was shut down and probably glad because it was covered live by the NTA.
NTA, that's right.
And also joining us this conversation from a studio in Jos is Professor Mohammed Aharo Menoma, the President of Association of the National Accountants of Nigeria and former Vice Chancellor of Nasarawa State University. We thank you, sir, for showing up this morning for this conversation.
I'm delighted to be here.
Again, in our Lagos studio, we have Tunde Oke, the immediate past chairman AG Leventis, Nigeria. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, well, gentlemen, let's start off this conversation. I mean, it's part of our series on the 59th independence anniversary of our dear country. We've talked about, several aspects of our independence. To focus today is actually on the role of the elite in the 59-year history of our dear country. Senator Kenny Namani, in your opinion, what has been the role of the Nigerian elite?
Well, to whom much is given, much is expected. The Nigerian elite is bearing the burden of trying to match words with actions. We know that in my place we have what is called age grade. Countries that are our contemporaries, when you talk about South Korea, Brazil, Malaysia, and some other countries, we have to bear the responsibility of explaining why we are behind our contemporaries. In terms of power generation, South Korea, with a population of less than 50 million people, they have over 45,000 megawatts of electricity. We're still battling between 3 and 5, 3 and 7 megawatts, 1,000 megawatts. I'm not sure it's more of 3 than or 7,000 megawatts. So we have the challenge, the onus is on the elites to explain why we're lagging so behind, why we're having what you may call a stunted growth in our country. And we're blessed with a lot of natural endowments, such as good weather. We don't have tsunami. I just came back from US. I happened to have visited Biloxi in Mississippi. I saw the effect of tornado in the place. It's supposed to be one of the poorest states in the US, Mississippi. But the environment doesn't show that. The infrastructure in that place. In fact, in some areas, the speed limit is 70 miles per hour. I still talk about miles. That tells you how good the roads are. So in our place here, we have oil. South Korea doesn't have a pint of oil. They import everything. But they have big multinationals competing in the world stage. You have Kia Motors, you have Hyundai, you have Daewoo, you have LG Electronics, you have Samsung. All these are based in Seoul, South Korea. I don't know how many multinationals that we can boast of here that is competing outside. If you are in Germany, you see Kia sign selling motors. And Germany produces one of the best in the world. But these South Koreans, these small people without any natural endowment, 3/4 of their land is either water or hill. 1/4 is just land. So what they're using is brain. So we have a lot of things that should keep us awake. Why are we not doing as much as we should be doing? With our oil, with our brain, and we have highly qualified people. So if we talk about the problem of leadership, it has nothing to do with the present administration because it has been going on for years. Leadership, if I say it's our problem, some people will say, but you are part of it. It's true. I am part of it. And I owe my children that explanation. Why is it that we're lagging behind so much? It should keep us awake. Any person pretending that we have done very well, I'm not too sure we have done extremely well. That's why I started by saying to whom much is given, much is expected. With our natural resources, with our manpower, everything, we don't have the destructive tendencies, except human tornadoes that we have in Nigeria. Other than that, I think we should be preparing to give account to the generation coming after us while we are so behind.
All right, Senator Kenamani, thank you indeed for your opening comments. And of course, when you're talking about resources, these days we say that resources cannot make a nation great, but of course, human capital and of course, knowledge make a nation grow big. And let's go to Tunde in Lagos. Let's go to you in Lagos to get your own view of the role of the elite in building this nation. Of course, you started 59 years ago, and from what Senator Ken Amani told us here, who was once president of the Senate, it means that he understands what the problems are. In your own opinion, what went wrong?
Well, thank you very much. I think that I will start by saying that we have been overcritical of ourselves. It is good to criticize, but sometimes when I look at the people who are criticizing at every point in time, they were always part of the past, of events they are criticizing. I agree that we're not where we ought to be, but I think Nigeria, looking at it from other perspectives, have achieved something in the last 59 years. When you look at 1960, a time of independence, how many universities can we count on our fingers? How was our roads at the time? But when you look at them now, as I said, I agree that maybe we have a pass mark. Maybe we still need to do much better. Maybe we need a program for human development. Yes, but for people to say that we haven't achieved something concrete to hand over to the generation coming after us, I disagree with that. I think Nigeria has come of age, and I believe that many of the problems that we have today are likely to be things of the past in the next 10, 20 years.
Sorry, Kingsley, because what he said, remaining with you, Joseph, please, when you said Nigeria has achieved, perhaps it means that we have recorded a quantum leap in development. If that is what you mean, Senator Nnamani raised the issue of practical development, infrastructure, services, water. We're still talking about the enigmatic power sector. We have issues with feeding ourselves, for instance. There are fundamentals when it comes to achievement, not necessarily because we are cohabiting, we are living together, we're maintaining peace as much as we can, but there are certain indices that should be considered when you talk about development. And I'd like you to come in, let's understand your view about development.
Well, I'm not saying no to what the distinguished senator has said. But what I'm saying is that we have to look at development in its totality. Yes, I agree, we have epileptic power, we have problem with water, which I hope can be fixed. But when you look at the situation today, we center all our criticism on the federal government. What about the state governments? What are they doing to develop their states? After all, we've been to countries where states provide electricity without looking up to the federal government. What are the states doing? I think that's the point I am making. We centered everything on the federal government. I'm not in government. I'm in the private sector. I've spent all my years in the private sector. But I believe that the states could do much better than they are doing in respect of those infrastructural development.
Okay, Mr. Oka, thank you very much. It looks like we're spending a lot of time with you now in your opening salvo, as it were. But let's clarify this. You just made mention of federal and states, that's to say subnational entities, which is one point that our guests have pursued here on Good Morning Nigeria, our focus today actually is on the elite class. If you went to the subnational entities, you will still find the elite class there. You will find them in the bureaucracy. You will find them amongst the political elite. You will find them amongst the business elite. You will find them also amongst the intelligentsia. So it's the collectivity of the elite categories that we are looking at on the Nigerian platform. And I'm sure you picked up the point that Senator Ken Namani said when he used the age grade analogy. That look, in the parts of the East, where you have age grades, you compare yourself to your mates. 59 years ago, you put us on the same pedestal. South Korea, Brazil, India, Malaysia, and Singapore. Where are they today? And then he escalated his contribution by talking about those achievements and then some of the challenges that we are still faced with here. So, Mr. Alke, we'll come back to you, to frame some other questions so you can also respond to them, especially from the private sector perspective. In the meantime, let's go over to our guests at our Jos Network Center, who was introduced a while ago, Professor Menoma. Professor Menoma, former Vice Chancellor of Nasarawa State University, of course, is an accountant, chartered accountant, and he, of course, is also been in governance and part of the intelligentsia. 59 years on, what has been the role of the Nigerian elite to our national odyssey?
Yes, thank you very much. The basic issue is that it has started, distinguished senator has opened with what we have not done as elites. Okay, Lagos has raised those things that we have done. So maybe the perspective I have to bring in is what we ought to do as elites. You find out that the basic values had actually gone out of our hands from the very beginning. Well, if you look at Nigeria for the last 59 years, it looks as if the values are degrading. Our founding fathers have started very well, but coming along the line, the elites make it impossible for people to see the core values of development. Also, you notice also the politicians are not including others. It is a game of whoever gets it takes all. It's a winner takes all. Again, that is not supposed to be the case. We're supposed to have a situation where the development of the nation is the responsibility for all. Imagine a situation where people marginally win election with 51%, and the totality of the remaining 49% are not taken along in governance. That ought not to be the case. There is also the issue of development agenda. You find out that every government comes and do what it does without necessarily continuing with a particular development agenda that has been set and agreed by the people. Then there is also the issue of legacy. You'll find out that people now, the elites particularly, are not bothered about what they can leave for the nation, but they are thinking about their children and within that small enclave only. So what we ought to be doing as elites is to have an agenda for development that is very inclusive. I think that is my starting point on this issue, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, Karen, I was just wondering. Let's return to Senator Ken Namani. Professor Menoma, we'll return to you. I mean, there are various theories about elite, so-called circulation of elite. You have the Pareto theory of the circulation of elite. But, Senator Namani, the point has been made that elsewhere, particularly the examples that you cited, you have the elite class that is modernizing. And in the examples where you have major challenges, you have an elite class or an elite group that is not modernizing. What, in your opinion, has been the major focus? I'd like you, for instance, to take the political elite class, which Professor Menoma was talking about. Nigerian political scientists and scholars have talked about the fact, usually phrased as follows, that ethnicity and religion are the ultimate refuge of the Nigerian political class. That's the Nigerian political elite. That in seeking power for the sake of power and for self-aggrandizement, they will appeal to ethnic and religious sentiments, and ultimately this will be the foundation of the crisis that we have had, trying to fight fires rather than trying to ensure that the wheel of progress keeps rolling. Senator.
Thank you very much. I would like to clarify one or two issues arising from the comments made by my friend in Lagos, Joseph Oke. My father told me that the worst lie any person can tell is the one you tell yourself. If I tell myself I have a Bombardier parked at Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport and I know that there's none there, it is the worst lie I can tell, because I'm telling myself lie. You see, we elites in Nigeria, we like to describe our country as a great nation. I like that word, great. But most countries that are great, they don't use that very word themselves. You hardly can hear American citizens say great American country and all this. But that assumption of greatness, we have nothing else to bother about. He misunderstood me. There's a difference between economic growth and economic development. I'm not talking about GDP and all the rest of it. I'm talking about general development, human index. Now, I think we elites must be able to tell ourselves the truth. Nigeria is a great nation. We all say that. But that greatness is because of that God has been so merciful on us. We have things we didn't. The oil that we are producing, generating revenue, is not because of our being the best people on earth. It's not because of the number of churches and mosques that we have built. That's why we have oil. That's not the case. We're just blessed by that natural endowment. The greatness I'm referring to is what people are able to achieve on their own, standing alone. We should be considering what happens to Nigeria after oil. So many countries that are buying oil from us are going to vehicles that will be using power, ordinary electricity. What will happen to our oil? Are we going to be drinking it or doing something with it? We must be thinking in a way. The challenge I think we at least have is we must know our limits. That if we must develop, talking about development now, as a nation, we must grab, and that's why I'm interested in this present administration. The present administration is emphasizing the losses arising from high-level corruption. Pipe A brings water, pipe B drains it. Corruption drains it. If you remember drill arithmetic in those days. If the government, this present administration, succeeds in plugging the loopholes of this drainage, then we talk about conserving the resources that will enable us to leapfrog into modernity. As we stand today, there's no trade, you don't cover much distance if you're on a treadmill, although you're making a motion. But the distance you are covering, you're in one place making the motion. So it's not that I'm criticizing Nigeria, I'm part of it. I didn't exclude myself, I didn't exonerate myself or anybody. But I would like us to think clearly and not deceive ourselves and deceive our people that we're a great nation. We haven't. Our achievement is the one that will define whether we're great or not. The use of religion and all that things in dividing our people. My best friends, I would say, while I was serving the Senate, are from the north. Most of them Muslims. So I don't think that if we live by example, if we lead by example, as the present administration is trying to do, cutting down on corruptive tendencies, and many people will not be very excited about that. So the problem is mainly on we elites. By misleading ourselves that we're great, we have achieved this. We have to look at our neighbors, the people that we started the journey with. Where are they today? I gave a specific instance, you know. So if you say we have done extremely well, that is the self-deceit I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
And that is the role of the elites. We try to deceive ourselves.
Sultan Amare, well, I'm going to remain with you because I want to ask a very fundamental question here. We're talking about a nation, building a nation. We are talking about running a system of government. Before now, in the 60s, we had a parliamentary system of government, which of course triggered some kind of a healthy competition among the regions. Today we still tell the story of Granite Pyramid. We tell the story of palm oil in the east. We tell the story of cocoa in the west and all of that, which of course gave birth to so many outstanding institutions in this country. Is it institutions? Is it the first television in Africa built by Awolowo in 1959? Yes. And all of that. Now, after the Civil War, Nigeria shifted. You know, there was a paradigm shift in the system, that we have adopted, which is the presidential system of government, which of course many elites agree is very expensive to run. You have been a Senate president, so you have been at the center of administration in Nigeria. And many will argue or raise issues concerning the system we are using at the moment. Is the system the problem? Because if you look at other nations that you mentioned, most of them are using parliamentary. China, for instance, they use a province. If you leave Beijing, which is the capital of China, and move 2 hours flight to Xinjiang, for instance, or Chengdu, or Shanghai, you hardly know the difference between them, because the development is apart, so to speak, in terms of even industrialization and education and what have you. So are we having a systemic issue here? We just had, remember last week we were talking about the 5.something billion naira, slated for just SUVs for people from National Assembly.
SUVs
that will be imported. That will be imported from Japan when we have Innocent and other local manufacturers. So what's your take?
Well, I think that our system of leadership recruitment, how we recruit our leaders, it seems to me to be very faulty. People who have not done anything before, who have no fixed address or second address, we was by hook or by crook, we managed to appear either in the National Assembly or at the state assemblies. And then we start all manners of expectation, entitlement. We expect that if you're a senator, you must ride a jeep and all these things. But were you riding a jeep before you got there? So if we look closely at the level, the way we recruit our leaders, and what they are, the individuals, that might even help us a little bit. I'm terribly worried about the statistics you reeled out, how some other countries and people, and that boils down to elites also, the payment some heads of state get, and the comparison with our National Assembly or State Assembly or governors here, things like that, what we call security vote. So many things. Unless we are able to point out the areas of deficit, we may not be able to solve the problems. If pointing out those areas is described as criticism, I'm sorry, but we have to look closely and say there are loopholes in so and so place. If we can identify that, then we'll be in position to start plugging it. And that is the role of the elites, by saying that this thing that we are doing is not correct. Let us correct it before our followers can now queue in. And we live by example.
All right, distinguished Senator, thank you very much. Let's return to Mr. Joseph Oke in our Lagos Network studios. Mr. Oke, in the intro to this conversation, I hope you listened to the Vox Pop. One of the respondents, a lady there, said, look, Nigerians, elite, they travel abroad, they see how things are, but there would appear to be a failure in seeking to transplant some of those good ideas to germinate on our own soil. I'm sure 40 years ago, I didn't know where a place called Dubai was. I couldn't identify it on the atlas. Probably the same story for many other Nigerians. But today, you can be sure that Nigerians, have choice properties in those locations as elsewhere, and these Nigerians belong to the elite class. Why have we failed, despite the fact that we say that we are amongst the most widely traveled in the world, to translate the ideas? Education is often gotten from travel. Why is it that we have failed as an elite class to translate some of these ideas into development for our country?
Thank you very much. I think I will borrow the word used by Senator Namani, that you put in government people of no fixed address, some people that have never held any positions in life. And when you refer to elite, mostly in our country, the elite class is prominent among politicians. Those were the ones that wants to show how they have arrived. And you mentioned the issue of Dubai. Some many years ago, there wasn't anywhere known as Dubai. But Dubai was developed by just a governor of one of the Emirates. And that was why I referred to our own governors. What are they doing? So when we talk about the elite class, mostly are people who are politicians, people in government. Now, the lady that said we have nothing to show because the elites have not done much, I want to agree with her. It is true. But the problem is neither because we're operating a parliamentary or a presidential system of government. Unfortunately, we say we're operating a presidential system of government, but we have not gone into it wholeheartedly. We're holding back. There are so much responsibilities that are left with the federal government. There's no devolution of power. And this is, of course, creating a lot of problems, a lot of hindrances, to the extent that what you see are people who are holding political positions. Those who go abroad for medical treatment and all that are mostly people in government, people holding political offices. And this is why we're having the problem. And this is why I did not want to respond to the issue of elite. Elitism is more predominant in Nigeria in people who are either politicians or who are serving in government. And they're all there. We can see them. The handwriting is really on the wall. So I think that to make progress in this country, we need to revisit our presidential system of government. We need to get it right. Because at the moment, it's a case of winner takes all. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Joseph Oke, my colleague here and I were just saying he had a question for you, but I said I wanted to add a follow-up. We had sketched the categories of elite groups, but you have focused on the political elite and the bureaucratic elite. From the private sector, you also have the business elite. Now, I'm not saying, I'm sure you can respond to this. In this same country, many years ago, we heard, for instance, of import license racketeering. It was very common, for instance, during the Second Republic. Collusion between the business elite and the political elite. We have also seen round-tripping from those who are in the financial services sector. In fact, the instances of capital flight where monies are taken out of this country to so-called safe havens are facilitated by persons, it is said, who are in the business elite. And that some of the things that some Nigerian businessmen do, if they tried it elsewhere, of course, they know what the consequences will be. And that foreign nationals, if they were confronted by others who said, no, we don't do this in my country, but Nigerians who said, no, go ahead and do it. Isn't that part of the challenge that we find from the elite class?
Yes, it is true. But if you go deeply into it, you will observe that the facilitators are usually people in government. I agree with you, what you have said. But it takes two to tango. When you look at the elites in the private sector and you compare what they're doing with the elites in the public service, there's a huge difference. It is true. We've talked about round-tripping. Yes, it is true. We've talked about import license racketeering. People in the private sector are in business. Yes, I agree. But when they are unable to procure import licensing, and these licenses are given to people who are closer to people in government, they get the licenses and bring it to the private sector for commissions. So, and the people in the private sector who wants to remain in business, definitely, they will have to do something to keep in business. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is that, yes, you talk about elites, yes, it cuts across, but I am saying that most of what has happened or what is happening are facilitated by people in politics or in government.
Thank you. We'll come back to it shortly, when we, of course, open up other perspectives to this conversation. But for now, let's go back to Lagos, where we have...
Jos.
Jos, rather, where we have Aharo Mainoma. Sir, you have listened to Senator Ken Nnamani and the areas that he touched, as well as Joseph in Lagos. And it appears that Nigeria is running a constitution that I'm not very sure is flexible enough to allow the states to do things on their own by themselves, totally. As Joseph was asking then, what is the role of the governors? And I wanted to look at the system Nigeria is running, for instance. Senator Nnamani also raised the issue of a devolution of powers and what have you. Now we are running a presidential system of government, expensive to run. Practically, Nigerians have seen it, and we all know it, and we're still stuck to that. Right, so is it a systemic problem? We all know that all the discussions we have had this morning, we have raised a number of critical issues that concerns the behavioral pattern of the elites, either in the bureaucracy, either in politics or business. There is no businessman, I'm not sure there are businessmen in Nigeria who became rich without being either government contractors or not being facilitated, as Joseph said, by people in government. So why are we where we are? My Senator Nnamani also said the issue of you are exerting some energy, yet you are in one place.
Thank you very much. I think the issues can be summarized into issues of attitude and that of priorities. You'll find out that first there is agreed that is the system problem, what you may refer to as the system failure. But we can reduce the cost of governance if we all agree that it is very expensive. For instance, why do we need a bicameral legislature, for instance? We can do with one. But that is not really the major issue. The major issue is that of attitude of the players. If they all agree that they are focused on development and they all agree that they have intention to make a difference, you'll find out that despite the cost, we can actually manage to have something that can help in the development process of this nation. Also attitude in the sense that you find out that a lot of the people that are the operators of the system have goals that are different from that of the nation. They are more bothered about what they can do for themselves. They are more bothered in consumption rather than investment. They are not critical on the needs of the nation and how to make somebody that is nothing to become something in the nation. They want to perpetuate in power, and therefore they make the selection process so difficult for those that are not within their own cycle. And that is actually the issue. Even where they even have surplus funds, instead of them to invest this so that it can generate employment for others, they will prefer to build mansions that nobody is staying inside. So these are some of the problems that instead of having increasing the productive capacity of the nation, we are having people that have some other priorities that are not in tandem with actually the development needs of our nation. So yes, there is the issue of expensive system that we are running, but it is also more of attitude and priority.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Mainoma. Here, again, we will now be delving into aspects of psychology. Oftentimes we hear that Nigerians, suffer from so-called conspicuous consumption. We have tastes developed for imported items, and of course, this will be usually championed by the elite class. In your opinion, what informs this? Why is it that we tend to think that, that which comes from outside must be better? I'll give you a typical example. I'm sure you recall, there was this fabric that was running in Lagos then in the 90s. It was lace material. It was called, is it whether Coupion or Goupio?
Yeah.
If you didn't have it, then you were in trouble. So they now had to scale it down to have baby Coupion or baby Goupio. I don't know whatever it was. It looked like singlet at the time. But if you didn't have it, then they scaled it down for the lower class, but the upper class and the middle class, everybody was going for it. As we still find our taste buds, people are going out. What informs this, and how might it be altered?
Thank you very much. The issue is that of competition among them. You find that because somebody has something and it is that kind of a thing, whether it is useful for him or not, the other person that believes they are in the same category must also have it. And it does not matter whether it is increasing the productive capacity of the nation. But what matters to them is that if my other colleague has this, I must also have it. And that is a dangerous tendency that makes the elites to be competing for things that are not relevant at all for creating jobs for our people. You find that they do things that are not necessarily for the benefits of anybody, but just because they want to compete among themselves. They create a platform that is just for them to show who has this and who doesn't have that. And that is actually detrimental to the progress of this nation. And that is why I say that it is attitude. If we all agree to come and salvage this nation by using what is our own, you find that a lot of people will then have something to do. And all these tendencies for crisis might not actually come up. And that is why I believe that the elites need to have change of attitude, and they must have their priorities right.
All right, let's return to Abuja once more, to Senator Ken Nnamani. Senator Nnamani, you were in the mix, as Senate President. And of course, being in that chamber means that you were interacting with the executive. Yes. You had your committees, who are oversighting many sectors of national economy, who also report back to you for further analysis and decisions taken at different periods of time concerning national development. Now, there is this issue of relationship between the National Assembly and the presidency over time. Right from the Obasanjo administration in 1999, it's been a Herculean task, having even when the presidency and the chamber were all belong to a particular party, belong to one party. There are also these issues and hiccups and all of that. And of course, whatever happens between the National Assembly and the presidency determines, to a great extent, the level of development this country can get, because that's why you do the budget and budget allocation. You oversight, oversight job determines whether some policies are being properly implemented or not. Now, what do you think is the problem of governance that Nigeria has? Because that agric is not doing well, power is not working, but there's no water and what have you. They all revolve around perhaps poor implementation of good policies.
Before I come directly to this your question, which I think is quite fundamental, I would like to say that the federal government is having too many things on its plate. It has banana, it has orange, it has apple, all at a time. We're talking about the development. The development here, I think that the states, and I like that very issue raised by Joseph Oke in Lagos, there are certain things that the federal government is busy doing, which should be best handled by the states. We talk about devolution of power, and some people call it, they use that word that has become negative now, it's called restructuring, whether it's economic or political. But I think the way we're moving now, we may not achieve much on a long time period. What do I mean by this? I'll give an instance. What is the business of federal government issuing driver's license? For instance, you stay here, you issue a license to somebody in far away, say like in Calabar, in Maiduguri and all this. There are certain things that should be allowed the states to do and let the states compete. There's no state in Nigeria that doesn't have one good natural endowment or the other. All the states are blessed in one way or the other. But if we create an enabling environment for them to compete, that will probably answer the issue raised by Joseph Oke in Lagos. What are the governors doing? Let's give them some responsibilities. Let them generate their own power. Let there be competition everywhere. But the way we concentrate everything at the center here, before you do, you have to get an approval. Police, you have to come to a date house. We can't make so much progress. And then coming back to the issue raised about the relationship between the legislature and the executive branch. Both branches are of the same government. And if Mr. President does not succeed, the administration has failed, including the legislative arm. As long as we understand this, that both are complementary. In order of primacy, those who prepared our constitution gave Chapter 4 deals with legislative issues. Chapter 5, the executive. Chapter 6 talks about the judiciary. Now, it tells you in order of primacy, legislature is so critical.
You're talking about section, not chapter.
Section.
Yes.
Sections, please. So, those sections will now tell you the importance of each section or the importance of each arm of government. I'm talking about the arm of government now. So, as long as those of people in the legislative arm recognizes that if the president does not do well, eventually, it will reflect on the entire administration. That administration includes even that of legislative arm, the judiciary. So the relationship has always been, because of the struggle, misunderstanding. There's a word called collaboration. The other one is called cooperation. We have to collaborate. Both arms of government has to collaborate. The collaboration aspect of it, I'll give an example, something like budgeting. That's an area where both the legislature and the executive branch do what is called co-management of the economy. They have to cooperate, collaborate, in order to do it. The executive will send the estimate, the National Assembly or the legislative arm has the responsibility of appropriation. In the United States, they say it's power of the purse. So every segment has its own role. And as long as you realize it, that you are playing as a team, and if one player, if the goalkeeper is not doing very well, it will affect the team. If the legislative arm is not doing very well or quarreling all the time, it's affecting the entire administration.
And when you were there, we didn't have a pardon when you...
Well, Kira, I just want to talk, Senator is talking about goalkeeper not there well. Loris did very well for Tottenham last night, but he considered 7 goals.
I watched it myself.
that was some thorough thrashing that they received. We are going to take a short break now. We still have all our guests, and of course we have tweets that have also come in. That since we're discussing Nigeria at 59, Kira, just one tidbit of history. When Nigeria gained independence in 1960, Nigeria vehicles were driving on the left-hand side, such as we'll find in the UK today or in Southern Africa. But that changed. So if you were born in the year 1972, that was the year Nigeria started driving on the right-hand side. Take a short break now.
You're welcome back. Well, my colleague Kingsley was talking about the right hand and left hand drive. I also want to inform you that we were using pounds and shillings.
Pounds, shillings and pence. Until?
I think 73.
You're correct. 1st of January 1973. But you still had pounds and shillings up until about April or so of that year.
We were using Naira and Kobo.
Naira and Kobo.
Yes.
And by the way, Kirian, if you were in elementary school at the time, very complex arithmetic that you had to do, pounds, shillings, and pence. You wrote the pounds like this, shillings was S, and then pence was D. The least coin you had then was a farthing, which was called anini.
Anini, yeah.
Yes, all right.
All right, some Nigerians are beginning to respond to this conversation by way of tweets, and we just have to read through some of them to know what they are saying. First of all, we have Cecilia Okorama. She says, Nigeria at 59, it's unfortunate that Nigerian elites have not led by example. If fathers don't teach their children morals, where will anybody expect the child to get it from?
That's socialization that he's talking about.
Exactly.
That's imitation, one generation to the next. And that's part of what Senator Namane was saying. What is we have some explaining to do to the generation coming behind us. Amabala Babs, in many instances, the elite have been seen to have self-served and only interested in their egocentric motives.
All right, Akeju Alabaju says, the only answer to the question of distinguished Senate President Ken Namani is simple. We simply went to sleep. Somebody needs to wake us up to see the sunlight in the day or moonlight in the night. And like one man said, he said, look, to teach Nigeria lesson, let the oil dry up. Then we will start using our brains.
That's part of what has been said. This one is Olashun Komi, I know, that's the handle. We are lagging behind in growing our country among nations because of so many factors, such as poor leadership, bad governance, corruption, ethnicity, and religious intolerance, saboteurs, and criminal activities over the years.
Omobola Hobab says, Nigeria is not where she ought to be, but she can do much better in all fronts: infrastructure, social security, human capital development, et al., in the right political will and selfless leadership.
Now, this is coming from Josh. He says, our political elite are our basic problem and challenge. 59 years of no productive progress. Now, that has to be segregated.
Exactly.
You have the civil political elite, and then you also have the military elite. The military ruled this country for a number of decades. A couple of decades, I believe, if you did it tally.
In fact, about 38 years.
Yes, okay.
Now, J. Klein Obareke says, when you have a country where the citizens say the military regime is the best time they have had, or some still craving for colonial rule, that's a huge problem. We elect leaders who don't love the country because you care for what you love.
All right, those are the twists that we are taking. I would like us to return to Mr. Joseph Oke in Lagos. Mr. Joseph Oke, look, in talking about the categories of the elite class, my colleague and I, Kirian, were bantering at the start of the program, and of course we identified them just by way of repetition. Political elite is there, you have the bureaucratic elite, you have the business elite, you have the intelligentsia, but essentially, the role of the bureaucratic elite, which is what we refer to basically as the public service. Public service is very critical, almost like a referee. Every other elite group can misbehave, but the bureaucratic elite will say this is doable, this isn't doable. In 1975, some historians will say we saw to the destruction of the bureaucratic class with the random and wanton dismissal and retirement of public officers, which some will say also led to the destruction again of the core values of the civil service from which the country has hardly ever recovered. In your opinion, is that correct? And have we tried as much as possible to regain the bureaucratic elite class of old? In other words, the civil service culture of old that ensured that things were done properly, timeously, and as stated in the books.
Very much. I think you have said it all. In 1975, when most of the permanent secretaries were removed, that was the beginning of the problems of Nigeria. Before then, we had distinguished permanent secretaries. I even know that some were called by special names. I won't mention their names here at that time. But after 1975, we had a problem. The powerhouse was broken by a military government. And since then, it has been so difficult to put a good team together. I remember around that time, some senior officers of, I think was NEPA or whatever they were called at the time, were also removed. And that was the beginning again of the problem that we have suffered in the provision of power to different homes. So I think that it is going to take some time, because those people that were dismissed or removed from services at the time were people trained not only during the colonial rule, but trained even after the colonial rule. But unfortunately, when they were removed and we had a new regime, they had to start all over again. So it is a big problem, and I believe it is going to take some time for us to get back to where we are in terms of the public service or bureaucratic elite of that time. But having said that, I thought that I should respond to a question that was raised, in the sense that there was an example of Toyosi lace or Wanyosi lace and all that. I will equate that with what is happening today, that we read in the papers that the National Assembly have voted a huge sum of money to buy four-wheel drive for every member of the National Assembly. Well, I don't know whether this is done in any other country where they operate this presidential system of government. But we have made it so expensive in our country, and that has been one of our problems and one of the ways that our resources are being siphoned. Thank you.
All right, we'll go back to, I wanted Menoma to come in here. Menoma, let's get your take on this issue that my colleague raised, and the question actually put to Mr. Oke that has to do with the bureaucratic elite, in the country. Yes, it's an example of what happened in 1975, but all those permanent secretaries who were, dismissed, so to speak, had people who understudied them over the years, and that it may not really mean that we have lost, what it takes to run a bureaucracy in Nigeria. Many people argue that what happened is that the people have, refused to obey the law, to follow what is in the papers, and this culminated into several abuses of different dimensions that led to the kind of bureaucratic arrangements that we have, where things don't move unless you drop something on somebody's table, nothing works. And I recall the former governor of and late Sam Beko of Imo State, may so rest in peace. He said, look, that honestly, after being a governor, he said, look, that it means that the colonial masters left us too early. That we are unable to internalize governance. We're able to internalize the process of administration that can lead to any form of development. So, in the Nigerian context, what is your take? In the well, if I say bad, you say is a wrong word. But what is your take on what happened to that elite sect? That's the bureaucratic section of the elite. The elite.
Thank you very much. I think we need to be careful not to justify what I would refer as to punishing people for doing a wrong thing because we want stability. You see, I think we should begin from the idea that it is the birth of corruption, actually, that has brought in those kind of things that we're talking about now. In the civil service before then, if people were doing their things correctly the way they ought to do it, definitely nothing is going to make them to be removed the way they were removed. So the fact that there is infringement, it also requires that there should be punishment. I think, but it is true that it has come with it a lot of instability in the sense that anybody that is appointed feels unsecured, that at the end of the day he could be removed any other day. So, and that actually aggravated the rate of corruption, where people were just accumulating in case they are asked to go. And it also brought about the idea of civil servants becoming contractors. They now began to have companies that are their own, and they give themselves the contracts and they execute them. So actually, it is something that has delved significantly to the psyche of this nation. That yes, there was the need to punish, but also there is the need to guarantee those that are doing it correctly, so that people can differentiate between that these are the people that did wrong and they were punished, and these were the people that are doing it correctly and therefore rewarded. I think that is what is missing in the bureaucracy, that it should not be a blanket thing that because some people have done a wrong thing, you just decide that you are going to generate a system where you cannot serve for more than 4 years or you cannot serve for more than 8 years, so that what we require is an entrenched system where those that are doing very well are fully rewarded and those that are doing it corruptly are punished. I think that is what is missing in the system as at now.
Professor Menoma, thank you very much. Let's return to Abuja studios. Senator Ken Nnamani, what's your take on what happened to the bureaucratic elite in the country 1975 and 1976?
Well, I think we used to have people who described as super pamsects, and their productivity reflected exactly the name they were given. I think that our civil service, despite all the reforms taking place, and it's a very important aspect of governance, if we can get that aspect very correct, and there be some measure of efficiency, there's a need for experience. And experience is not just garnered by the number of years and so on, but those of them that have practiced their act of serving the public, and they did it so well. So many of them distinguished themselves very well. I don't know, it becomes a thing of worry if we are saying that those who served in those years, in the 60s and 70s, if we are lamenting today that they did better than we are doing today, then what is the improvement? Because every parent tends to wish the son or the daughter to do better than himself. Mm-hmm. I thought we should be looking forward and improving on the performance of those that came before us. So our civil service, the rate of corruption, we shouldn't be afraid of that, because if we can identify it, inefficiency in the civil service, slowing down business activities, slowing down government activities. I don't know if we have to do certain things afresh. Today, other countries that are moving faster are de-emphasizing the use of papers. Everybody is now going online to achieve certain things. Maybe that will increase the efficiency. And those that are already in the civil service may have to go through a thing you call retooling. They have to go back to learn. Instead of being analog, they try now to become digital. Mm-hmm. I know it's a Herculean task, but it can be accomplished. We're talking about efficiency. If we must achieve that efficiency aspect, we must think about changing the ways we have been doing things before.
Okay, Senator, let me remain with you, because time is going, so I can get this part of the question that I have planned for him. Talking about corruption among the political class. Well, you've first given us an analysis of your own thoughts with respect to today's bureaucratic, elite, which of course, you can see, some of them are only mansions. Some officers in certain ministries or parastatals who are not below level 12 are using cars worth over 20 million, and nobody is asking the questions. Now, talking about corruption in the political class is huge, is wide, because they have the wherewithal, to carry this money in huge quantity to be able to own structures abroad, and just across the globe. Because from investigations that started by this administration in 2015, we discovered that in between 1999 and 2015, the amount of money that left the seashores of Nigeria and the kind of resources that we can trace across the globe is quite humongous. What would be your advice on the players at the moment, not just at the national level, but at the state level? We also have state governors who brandish SUVs. You will see, if you see a governor has up to 10 SUVs, on a particular tour, and all of that. What would be your advice as somebody who has experienced this yourself?
Thank you. It's not just political class that perpetrate the issue of high-level corruption. Political class cannot achieve it without the support of the civil service. That's one thing. So it permeates the entire system. And I see politics as service. I made mention earlier, I thought you have taken me up on that the way we recruit our leaders, our political leaders, is faulty.
What should be the right way?
Now, I'm coming to explain that quickly. Now, somebody who has not served himself or herself suddenly finds himself or herself signing checks in millions. That's the beginning of the corruption aspect. We have to look deeply in the caliber of individuals that attain certain positions. What's their pedigree? I talked about people having fixed address or second address. Politics is not, you cannot say you're a career politician. There must be something you are doing before you go. You must have served yourself and your family before we say you are serving Nigeria. So somebody comes out of school, all of a sudden he's signing checks in millions. He hasn't rented a house of his own or a flat. So you have to look at that. What is this person doing before this time? What is he likely to do? So that's the recruitment exercise I'm talking about. So it's not just political class that is carrying out the high crime in the area of corruption. It's not just that. It's everywhere.
Okay. Senator Nnamani, thank you very much. Very briefly, I hope you can be brief. Professor Benoma, former Vice Chancellor of Nasarawa State University. I would like you to respond to this issue relating to the intelligentsia, which is another category of elite groups. We have seen in the history of Nigeria, and of course not in the last 20 years when we've had stable democracy, during military regimes. The intelligentsia came out often in support of military regimes, against civilian regimes that were overthrown, and provided intellectual support, and we saw, of course, what the consequences were with regard to some of those military regimes. But one of the issues that some persons keep talking about is that our intelligentsia, particularly those in the ivory tower, are not helping in solving problems. Too theoretical, and yet we have workaday issues, whether in management or how to solve our own problems. We keep going out in search of solutions. How might the academia be of help in this regard?
It is to, again, go back to the basis. Even the curriculum they are operating outdated. They need to understand that there is a need to review completely and overhaul the curriculum so that the kind of products we are bringing out should be the products of actually 21st century, where they will have hands-on the things they do, issues of making sure that they can do the things that they're talking about. Entrepreneurship is core. ICT is mandatory. These are the kind of things that must be inbuilt in the curriculum. Then, as scholars themselves, they should appreciate the fact that the era of terrorism is over. That they should be talking about things that are really practical, that are addressing societal problems. That the kind of researches they conduct now must be such that are really providing solutions to the kind of problems that are facing the nation. And they must be in a position to be able to look at the future and see the likely things that are going to come up and challenges. And these are not difficult, because some other states and some other nations are already ahead. Some of these things are already very visible, that once they expose themselves to this academic tradition, you'll find out that the academia will be more relevant to the development of this nation.
All right, well spoken. But actually, having covered science and technology for a while now, I happen to understand that in so many institutes of higher learning, and of course research institutes, there are hundreds of research results there on the shelf. Many of them are there. But what the problem is that we have to learn how to shift from the laboratory to the floor of the manufacturing sector. Who will come and commercialize it? Who is going to put his money in these research results? If you have watched all the expose being done by the Ministry of Science and Tech, you'll find Nigerians, even the illiterate Nigerians, coming up with innovations, coming up with creations, things you will wonder, how did this come to play? In this country, even science students in primary and secondary schools, coming up with problem-solving ideas. You can see practically. But the point is, who is going to put his money there to commercialize them? And I want Joseph Wuke, just 10 seconds here. How can we now build a bridge between the intelligentsia, those who have research, and of course those who have the capacity and the wherewithal to commercialize them?
Thank you very much. I think we need to take a look at our university system, because recently I saw in one of the papers that China has converted about 400 universities to polytechnics because they want people to go there and learn how to use their hands. Now, in our own cases here, most of the results of their laboratory, from their laboratories, are kept in the universities. They are never exposed to the private sector. And I think that this is a job for the University Commission, because you cannot say that the universities on their own, individually, should market their inventions, because that may be an uphill task for them. But if where you have the University Commission being able to assist 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 universities in marketing the product that they have developed from these various universities, I am sure that organizations in the manufacturing sector will be highly pleased to take them on. But this has to be sold to the various companies, because you need a lot of investments.
And patenting.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Joseph, okay, thank you very much, Professor Menoma. Thanks a lot, Senator Ken Namani. Thank you so very much for the perspectives that you have brought to the topic today. Of course, it's on the heels of Nigeria's 59th independence anniversary celebration. We have another set of tweets. The tweets have come in torrents, Kirian. We are unable to go through those tweets now because we're actually overrunning at this time. But I would like to appreciate you, Jasim, Shays, Mangai Akpadu is talking about the NYSC. It says the NYSC was set up for the unity of the country, but today the elite have changed by walking the posting of their children to their favorite location.
And this one is interesting. Prince said the elite also bastardized the federal character.
That's right. It says Nelson Elia, the elites are creating a gap between themselves and the masses. You have others, Abbas Saad, it says Nigeria is not going the same direction with its peers. This means that we are going the wrong direction.
We have Kenneth. And then, well, that's the much we can take.
We can take, absolutely. Yeah. We'd like to thank you one more time for sending in your comments. So it's on that note, we again would like to appreciate all our viewers for tuning in to Good Morning Nigeria. It's broadcast Monday to Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning, right up to this time, which is just before 9 a.m. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kieran Umai, also thanking you for being part of our show this morning. Tomorrow is yet another broadcasting day. We'll see you then.